There's a frequency shift happening in your consciousness right now, and chances are you've been feeling its effects for weeks, maybe even months, without fully understanding what's occurring. It's like tuning into a radio station that's almost clear, but not quite. You catch fragments of something profound, glimpses of a reality that feels simultaneously foreign and deeply familiar. If these words found their way to you today, if something compelled you to engage with this content, then you're already receiving the transmission. You're already picking up the signals that indicate your reality is preparing to reorganize itself around a completely new paradigm. The majority of people walk through these cosmic downloads completely unconscious. They're so embedded in their current programming, so hypnotized by their existing patterns, that they miss the subtle frequencies broadcasting their next evolutionary leap. They interpret the restlessness as stress, dismiss the synchronicities as mere coincidence, and suppress the inner stirring that's actually their soul's GPS, recalibrating for an entirely new destination. But something in you is different. Something in you is awake enough to recognize that transformation isn't approaching. It's already rewiring your internal systems from the inside out. Research in consciousness studies reveals something extraordinary about human evolution. We don't transform linearly. Instead, we experience what scientists call punctuated equilibrium. Long periods of apparent stability followed by rapid, dramatic shifts that completely reorganize our entire being. These quantum leaps in personal evolution don't announce themselves with obvious signs. They operate through what I call invisible architecture, a series of seemingly disconnected events that are actually perfectly orchestrated preparation for your emergence into a higher dimension of yourself. But there are recognizable patterns. There are consistent energetic signatures that appear before every major consciousness upgrade. Once you understand how to decode these transmissions, you'll never miss another opportunity for quantum expansion again. The first indicator that you're entering a new dimensional frequency is what I term sacred restlessness. This isn't the surface level dissatisfaction that comes from external circumstances misaligning with your preferences. This is a soul-level transmission that emerges even when your material reality appears to be functioning optimally. You might have achieved the career milestone you've been pursuing, established the relationship you thought you desired, acquired the lifestyle you've been manifesting. Yet there's this persistent sense of energetic incongruence. It's as if your consciousness has outgrown the container of your current identity, like your spirit is wearing a costume that once fit perfectly, but now constrains your authentic expression. Consider Rachel's experience 18 months before she transitioned from pharmaceutical research to energy healing. She had achieved everything her conditioning told her to want: a prestigious position at a leading biotech company, a salary that afforded her every comfort, recognition from peers she respected. Yet she found herself feeling like an actor playing a role in someone else's story, experiencing this inexplicable longing for something she couldn't even name. That sacred restlessness wasn't a problem requiring solution or a feeling demanding suppression. It was intelligence. It was her consciousness broadcasting that she had completed this particular curriculum and was ready for advanced coursework in the university of her own becoming. Most people attempt to quiet this restlessness through external modifications. They relocate to different cities, pursue new hobbies, acquire different possessions, believing these changes will resolve the energetic misalignment. But sacred restlessness originates from an internal evolution that can't be satisfied through external rearrangement. The second transmission is the amplification of your intuitive bandwidth. Your psychic receptivity begins operating at frequencies you didn't even know existed. Information downloads directly into your awareness without passing through your logical processing centers. You start accessing knowledge that seems to emerge from beyond your personal database of experiences. Visions become more crystalline and prophetic. You find yourself articulating wisdom that surprises your conscious mind, as if you're channeling insights from a version of yourself that already exists in your future timeline. Consider Michael's experience 3 years before he relocated to Costa Rica and established his permaculture sanctuary. Despite having no background in sustainable agriculture or any logical reason to leave his consulting practice in Manhattan, he began receiving incredibly detailed visions of himself teaching regenerative farming techniques to international students in a tropical environment. These weren't daydreams or wishful fantasies. They were precise, multi-sensory downloads that included specific conversations, the feeling of rich soil between his fingers, the exact layout of garden beds he had never designed. He started making decisions based on these future memories, studying permaculture principles, learning Spanish, building savings for a transition that his rational mind couldn't yet comprehend. When the opportunity to purchase land in Costa Rica emerged 2 years later, every detail aligned perfectly with his visions. Your intuitive faculties amplify before major transitions because you require enhanced guidance systems to navigate uncharted territory. Your analytical mind can only compute based on historical data, but your intuitive intelligence can access probability streams that haven't yet materialized in physical reality. The third transmission involves the magnetization of aligned mentorship and guidance. Just before your consciousness upgrade, existence begins attracting exactly the teachers, resources, experiences, and catalysts necessary to prepare you for your transformation. These aren't always conventional spiritual guides or formal educators. Sometimes it's the conversation with a taxi driver who shares a story that shifts your entire worldview. Sometimes it's a podcast that appears in your recommendations containing the precise perspective you needed to integrate. Sometimes it's a friend who suddenly begins exploring topics that have been privately fascinating you for months. When Patricia was preparing to end her marriage and begin her journey into conscious single motherhood, wisdom keepers appeared everywhere. Her hairdresser started sharing stories about thriving as a single parent. Her neighbor mentioned a support group that would become instrumental in her transition. A book about conscious uncoupling literally fell off a shelf and landed at her feet in a bookstore she had never visited before. Even her ex-husband began demonstrating emotional maturity and collaborative co-parenting skills she had never witnessed during their relationship. The universe was orchestrating Patricia's access to every tool, insight, and support system she would need for her successful transition into her next chapter. This isn't random serendipity. This is intelligent design. When your consciousness is ready for expansion, reality responds by providing precisely calibrated guidance and resources. Your responsibility isn't to desperately search for these connections or try to force synchronicities into existence. Your role is to remain receptive and alert, trusting that perfect guidance will manifest at exactly the optimal moment. The fourth transmission is the intensification of your emotional bandwidth. Feelings become more vivid, more present, more demanding of your attention. Experiences that previously would have generated mild responses now trigger waves of emotion that seem disproportionate to their apparent cause. You might find yourself moved to tears by a piece of music, overwhelmed by the beauty of a sunset, or experiencing surges of compassion that leave you breathless. This isn't emotional instability or heightened sensitivity. This is emotional intelligence expanding to accommodate the fuller spectrum of human experience. Before your next dimensional shift, your emotional system undergoes what can only be described as a comprehensive recalibration process. You're not becoming more reactive, you're becoming more responsive. The emotions you've been storing, the feelings you've been deferring, the aspects of your heart you've been protecting, they all surface requesting acknowledgement and integration. This emotional expansion isn't chaotic turbulence. It's systematic preparation. Imagine updating the software of your heart before installing a completely new operating system. You can't carry every emotional pattern from your current dimension into your expanded reality. Some feelings, some responses, some ways of processing life that served your previous version simply won't be compatible with the frequency you're growing into. James noticed this recalibration approximately 8 months before he left his law firm to become a wilderness therapy guide. He had spent 2 decades building expertise in corporate litigation, developing the emotional detachment necessary to navigate high-stakes legal battles. Suddenly, he found himself profoundly affected by the human stories behind every case. A particularly contentious divorce mediation left him feeling genuine grief for both parties involved. Witnessing colleagues manipulate legal technicalities for financial advantage triggered waves of moral discomfort he had never experienced. Even positive outcomes, winning cases, receiving recognition, celebrating with his team, generated this bittersweet mixture of accomplishment and alienation that confused his rational mind. What James was experiencing was his heart expanding to accommodate the empathy and authentic connection he would need in his future role. His emotional intensification was clearing decades of professional armor, creating space for the vulnerability and genuine caring required to guide others through psychological healing. The 5th transmission is what I call reality reconstruction. Your external environment begins shifting in ways that appear unrelated but are actually perfectly synchronized. Relationships naturally complete or evolve. Some connections gracefully dissolve while others emerge with uncanny timing. Professional opportunities conclude while new possibilities present themselves from unexpected directions. Arrangements that seemed permanent suddenly become fluid, while options you never considered start materializing with surprising momentum. This isn't existence working against your interests. This is existence reorganizing itself to match the vibrational signature of your emerging self, rather than maintaining the configuration that supported your previous identity. What appears to be chaos is actually precision engineering. Consider Elena's experience during the 18 months before she launched her online education platform. First, the startup where she had worked for 5 years was acquired, and her position was eliminated through restructuring she couldn't have predicted. Then her roommate decided to move across the country, ending their shared living situation. Her long-distance relationship naturally concluded when they realized their life visions were no longer compatible. From any external perspective, it appeared that Elena's stability was disintegrating. But each apparent ending was actually creating space for her new reality to emerge. Losing her position provided the financial motivation and freedom to develop her own curriculum. Her housing situation changing forced her to find a space better suited for filming educational content. The relationship conclusion freed her from the compromise and divided attention that would have limited her ability to build something entirely her own. What seemed like a sequence of unfortunate disruptions was actually masterful orchestration, preparing her for the adventure that would completely transform her professional trajectory and personal fulfillment. The sixth transmission is the emergence of your future self in present moment experiences. You begin having encounters where you feel like you're experimenting with an expanded version of your identity. Perhaps you find yourself speaking with authority on topics you've never formally studied. Maybe you discover yourself making decisions that feel completely unlike your historical patterns, yet perfectly aligned with who you're becoming. Perhaps you surprise yourself by taking leadership in situations where you would typically remain in the background, expressing perspectives you didn't realize you held. These moments aren't personality glitches or temporary anomalies. They're previews. Your expanded self already exists as a pattern in your consciousness, and as your transformation approaches, that version of you begins bleeding through into your current reality. You receive opportunities to test drive aspects of your evolved identity before fully embodying it. The seventh and most subtle transmission is what I call the quiet certainty. Beneath all the external changes, beyond all the emotional recalibration, underneath all the uncertainty about what's manifesting next, there exists this profound, unshakable sense that you're flowing in perfect rhythm with your highest evolution. Even when your mind is generating questions and your heart is pulsing with anticipation, some deeper aspect of you feels completely calm, completely trusting, completely synchronized with whatever intelligence is orchestrating your transformation. This quiet certainty doesn't emerge from having complete information or being able to preview your entire journey. It arises from profound trust in the wisdom of your own becoming. You begin understanding that you don't need to figure everything out because life is computing it for you. You don't need to force your evolution because it's happening organically. You don't need to accelerate toward your next dimension because it's approaching at exactly the optimal pace. Let me pause here for a moment to address something important. If these transmissions are resonating with you, if you're recognizing these patterns in your own experience, then you're part of a larger awakening that's happening on this planet right now. This isn't just about individual transformation. though that's certainly part of it. This is about collective evolution, and your willingness to recognize and honor your own expansion contributes to the upgrade of human consciousness itself. If you want to be part of this ongoing exploration, if you want to continue receiving insights about the deeper patterns of transformation and awakening, the most powerful way to support this work is through your engagement. When you subscribe, you're not just adding to a number. You're signaling to the algorithms that this kind of content matters, that there's hunger for depth and authenticity in a world often saturated with surface-level material. When you recognize these signs operating in your own experience, when you see these transmissions active in your current reality, you realize something extraordinary. You're not a passive recipient of transformation. You're an active participant in the most sophisticated creative process in existence. Your next dimension isn't something that happens to you. It's something that emerges through you. It has been gestating in your consciousness, waiting for the precise moment to birth itself into your material experience. So, if you're experiencing that sacred restlessness, if your intuitive bandwidth is expanding, if aligned guidance is magnetizing into your life, if your emotions are recalibrating, if reality is reconstructing around you, if glimpses of your future self are emerging, if there's a quiet certainty humming beneath it all, then understand this truth. Your next dimension isn't approaching someday. It's not a distant possibility or an optimistic fantasy. It's here. It's now. It's ready to express itself through you in ways that will transcend your current imagination. And here's something I want you to try. A way to anchor this understanding into your lived experience. If you've felt the truth of these transmissions resonating in your cells, if something inside you has been recognizing itself in these patterns, then let's create a moment of conscious acknowledgement. In the comments, write this phrase, "I am ready to receive." But don't just type the words, feel them. Let them be your declaration to the universe that you're prepared to step fully into the frequency that's been calling your name. This isn't just a comment. It's your conscious participation in your own evolution. A signal that you're ready to stop waiting for permission and start embodying the magnificent being you're already becoming.